welcome back to yet another episode of your Re-Educated podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, my dear friend, Ellis O'Brien. He is currently a USDC Data Science and Analytics Fellow for the State Department and has been a data scientist for many other organizations such as the Massive Data Institute and the Information Technology Industry Council. If you need to meet somebody who is interested in policy, in data, and everything else American, Ellis is the perfect person to talk to. I'm really excited for today's conversation. How are you doing?
I am doing well, Gautam. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I feel like when we first started, I feel like the only reason I had the courage to keep going was I was like, okay, I know there's one person listening to every episode, and I had that confidence. So I really appreciate all the support, actually.
That's sweet. I mean, not that I doubted you, but it's been so impressive to remember you starting it in your apartment in Georgetown, um, 3 years ago now, and to be here years later and having seen your consistency is something to behold.
Wow, wow, it's been 3 years. That's actually
Yeah.
crazy. Wow. I mean,
Hmm.
even when I was writing up these questions for you, I was thinking a lot about Georgetown and just what that time meant for me. And I
Hmm.
wanted to kind of start the conversation. I felt like that would be the perfect place to start the conversation. Maybe we could briefly start by touching just like how you got to Georgetown, what your kind of journey was before you actually ended up applying to Georgetown. Because I know you went to Bates for undergrad, but you grew up in California. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you kind of ended up going to Bates and what that transition from West Coast to East Coast was like.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I grew up like you. I grew up in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto. So I think was kind of exposed to tech from an early age, but was never like particularly interested in like computer science, or I wasn't like a kid like building a computer from scratch or anything like that, or like coding at age 9. Um, and I think I was always kind of interested in like bigger policy and societal questions. And I loved California. I loved Silicon Valley, but I think also was kind of ready for a change going to college. So going to Bates was a huge transition. I mean, my sister had gone to a small school on the East Coast, so I kind of had a blueprint of what that would look like. But I really did. I really mean this. I had culture shock on my first day of school, like just being on the East Coast. I think you've expressed something similar going to grad school. Like that was a big shift ending up at Bates. Um, but I loved Bates. I studied economics and American cultural studies with a focus on African American studies and racial justice. And so I think that was kind of, I stumbled into an African American studies class my freshman year because I didn't get into calculus. And so but that I think studying American cultural studies and economics kind of exposed me to some quantitative analyses and then also more like qualitative and human analyses and kind of how those two areas or disciplines intersect. And
Hmm.
after, mhm. And so after grad school, or after, sorry, undergrad, I went to work in Boston for a couple of years for a company that modeled hurricane catastrophes. And I was a data analyst for them. And that was really interesting. It was a great experience for me. Loved the work, got to learn a lot, but really wanted to get more into the policy side of things. And so that's how I ended up at Georgetown studying data science and public policy.
Hmm. I mean, I think it's so interesting because it seems like what your undergrad was, it was this kind of, I don't meet a lot of people who genuinely studied the liberal arts. I think it's like, but when you t talk to someone like you, I think it's so clear what the difference is. It makes everything kind of have a practical application. Like I think the best way to describe it is there was another program at Georgetown. It was just the pure data science masters rather than
Mm-hmm.
the one that we did, which was like data science for public policy. I feel that when someone has a liberal arts background, they're able to connect whatever it is that they're learning technically into like real world problems. They don't ever just live in some abstract bubble where it's like, this exists for the sake of it itself. I think when I
Mm-hmm.
first met you, we would get in debates all the time because this was like a very new thing for me. Because I think it was a very new process for me to be able to be like, okay, everything that we're learning in school has a practical application to the real world in all these ways, and they're not abstract silos where you can just like nerd out about them forever without them actually having to connect back to real issues that are happening around us. So I think like, would you say that was one of the benefits you've noticed in a liberal arts education?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think whether it's economics, you can go infinitely deep on some economic theory of how to model some problem, or you can go in data science or computer science, you can go so deep on some abstract algorithm of like how to, you know, solve or optimize the solution. But if you can't apply it to the real world, one is lost. So I think, yeah, I think a big benefit of the liberal arts is no matter how deep you go, learning how to apply that tool practically in the real world.
Hmm. So I guess like from talking about our background now, getting to our time at Georgetown, I look so fondly upon just those 2 years and what they meant to me. And I don't know, I have a lot of friends going through their PhD now, and in some ways, I guess I never felt like our program was really all that different in the sense that it felt really rigorous in like the transition our brains were taking in the way that we were thinking about problems, the way we approached, these things in our lives. What was the 2 years at Georgetown like for you? Do you feel like they were challenging? In what ways were they challenging? And in what ways do you feel like you grew?
It's a great question. I completely agree. I think I reflect really just have nothing but positive memories. I mean, I think of first semester. I think a lot of like sitting in your basement apartment, just like having you teach me data science, was really transformative to me. I think the program did a really excellent job of like we talked about mixed methods of exposing you to data science, statistics, and then like policy problems and getting you thinking about all of those at the same time. And I think on top of that, I know it's almost like a cliche in school, but like teaching you how to think and not what to think. But I think that's really important. And I think that's something that our program did really well was giving you a toolkit to solve problems, whether you're using traditional statistics, more advanced data science and machine learning, or a more qualitative policy approach. I think on the whole, that interdisciplinary way of studying was really transformative to how I think about world problems now.
Hmm. That's a good way of, you know what's really funny? I feel like we've had so many conversations throughout the years, but I'm realizing it now as we're recording this conversation, you're actually really, really good at giving high power answers very succinctly. I feel like I talked to enough professors where I'm like, people can really drone on forever about the same thing, but because I'm waiting. I'm like, normally I have time to like think about the next question, think about where I'm gonna go, but you answer things so succinctly and honestly, you put it all into like 20 seconds. By the time I even have the next lead, I'm already like, he's finished. But it's like, no, it's amazing. I feel like you've worked a lot on just like your ability to present your ideas like in a pretty like power punch boom, like this is the point that I have to get to. And I would say, that is actually one of the big benefits. I don't know, when I think about grad school and what it meant to me, what you said right there, where it was like we weren't necessarily ever taught what exactly to think. Like these are the right things, because it's policy. It's so open-ended, and I feel like we were able to have, and I actually just ended up uploading our conversation with he worked for the Jeb Bush, and he worked for Jeb Bush and he worked for what was his name? Mitt Romney.
Alex
And
Lundry.
yeah, Alex Lunder. We had a professor who, we were able to get very diverse views in that like there was no right answer to a lot of the policy things that we were looking at. But that didn't take away from our ability to actually like speak about them and talk to people from around the world to get new perspectives. Was there anything you feel like could have done better, could have been done better to maybe facilitate your learning a little better?
Yeah, there's a few things, and one I really appreciate what you said about like Alex Lundry there because like it was not about what a professor thought or what their background was. It was about like the skills that they had and the knowledge they could share. So like he was our data viz professor. So regardless of his political beliefs or how they differ from yours or mine. Like he taught us to really care about data viz, and like that's what matters, right? He taught us that data visualization is serious and like to take it seriously and like the principles of data visualization. And so I think that's a great example of like, you know, giving you the toolkit, but not telling you exactly how to use it. And then in terms of challenges or things that can be better, I think there's a few things. I mean, I think there was kind of cycles of really intense periods versus less intense periods. I'm thinking like the first semester where I often felt overwhelmed. It was like you're drinking from a fire hose of taking data science and trying to learn like Python and algorithms and statistics and taking two other a challenging econ course and a writing intensive policy course. I think the first semester was really overwhelming. And so I'm not sure I got quite as much out of it as I could have if it was a little, more manageable. And then on the flip side, I feel like our second semester was maybe, drinking from like a trickle or underpowered water fountain in the sense that there wasn't as much there wasn't as much. And so I was kind of went from being like widely overwhelmed to a little not bored's not the right word, but felt like I could have been doing. So there's
Mm.
a few small things like that. And then this is like less old and the scope, but I would have loved to keep the water metaphor going. I'd have loved to get like a deeper well in some areas, and dive a little deeper, like into the linear algebra of some algorithms, or like get deeper into neural networks or deep learning or reinforcement learning. But again, there's only so much you can do in 2 years, and I think the program kind of gave you a lot of the abilities of like how to learn yourself. So being able to explore those after graduation has also been a big benefit.
Hmm. I guess like, when I first started the program, one thing I was very confused about is because when you typically learn about machine learning, you learn about applications like in recommendation systems or in, all these algorithms that are used to run Facebook or but when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
policy, I was very like confused. I was like, where does this intersection even lie? In the work that
Mm-hmm.
you did at Georgetown and then also all the work you've done after, what are some of the things and places you've seen? Because there's so many where machine learning does intersect with in like industry or policy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenging question because it is kind of a new field. Like there's not a lot of thought of where data science was, developed a lot to, help advance click rates, or make private sector predictions. And in terms of policy, it's a lot of like traditional statistical understanding of inference of what causes this. That's fixed effects regressions, regression discontinuity design. So getting into machine learning is a challenging in the policy space. Having said that, I think there's really no shortage of applications for machine learning and policy, but they need to also be guided by a human. So like a few example, I know of people doing great work on, predicting conflict and using destabilization using machine learning algorithms. And then having said that, you can't just throw throw an algorithm at it and not have anyone with deep expertise review those algorithms to make sure that those questions are correct. A lot of machine learning, for predicting, who might be prone to losing health coverage or who might be
Hmm.
at high risk of an eviction. So you can kind of get into those early treatments and those early policy solutions. And again, having said that, you need a human review of those processes, because those are things again where I also don't think you can discount the importance of domain knowledge and policy expertise. But I do think in spaces like that, combining machine learning with a more qualitative and policy understanding really can improve
Hmm.
government services and public policy.
Those are all really good examples of like the prediction. I mean, I think both of those examples were prediction. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I think about living in DC particularly is I've been feeling this a lot as I've been traveling as well. I've been feeling very deeply patriotic. We went to this conference and I was the only American there. And so in a lot of ways, I felt like I had to represent the country, especially when we were having political conversations. And I felt
Mhm.
a deep sense of pride in being American. And I think there's a whole bunch to explore of what that even means and so on and so forth. But
Hmm.
I think being in DC really does evoke a sense of patriotism within everyone who lives there, mainly because you have to see every federal office as you drive by and you realize how many people work to make sure the transportation is working fine, to make sure your education, I mean, every single bit, like environment, this and that. It's like insane the number of people who have to work behind the scenes to actually make the country function as a whole. And you start to realize all these tiny little things that are happening just to make sure that everything can kind of function to some like relatively smoothly. And so you have a deep appreciation for the effort that has been placed for hundreds of years to make the country what it is today. Do you feel like DC kind of evoked that for you as well? And then I'm really curious because after that you started working for the federal government at the State Department. Do you feel like that's also added an extra layer of kind of admiration for the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you hit on there of just like how many people are working behind the scenes to make the government really profound point. And like that's not something I really even realized until I started working for the government. And yeah, being in DC, like my commute takes me in between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, and it's just it really never fails to like take my breath away and not inspire me. It, all the monuments, the museums, the federal buildings, the history. It's really special, and I really hope there's never a day where that like stops being special to me and stops giving, a deep sense of reverence for your country and also kind of duty to do what you can to make it
Mm,
a better place. And then, yeah, working for the government, I think kind of like you said, being behind the scenes, a lot of any company, you just kind of take for granted that their products get delivered. Like when you open an app like Gmail, you're not thinking about all the software developers, things like that, who are behind the scenes, working to working to make the app function. And it's the same thing for government. Like before working in government, you don't think of all the things that you just take for granted of services that
mm,
get delivered, but there's services that have to be delivered that people rely on. And so I think that that sense of duty is deeply motivating, whether I'm doing statistics or data science or even something like as mundane as cleaning data. If you think that that cleaning data could be used for a government program that someone could depend on, like that's a lot of motivation to like clean the data well. And so I think that's something that I've really enjoyed working for the government.
I like the piece you said about duty. I feel like a lot of what I left DC feeling was like, okay, I have a commitment to the country in a certain way to devote myself for education or whatever it is that I
Hmm.
would have never thought of earlier. I mean, I feel like until I got to DC, I always thought my career was about me. And then once I got to
Yeah,
DC, I was like, oh, my career is actually about others. It's about what you can do for
that's
others. It's not just about what you can do for yourself.
that's beautiful, Gotham. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think DC is also just such a cool place because I think every city you go to, you kind of like just naturally sit in its like ethos. So like in San Diego,
Hmm.
you're way more likely to become a San Diegoan just by living there, the types of things people think about, care about, lounging on the beach, enjoying yourself. If you have a weekend, go like surf, go, go snorkeling, go just hang out. You don't really need to like stress too much. But if you live in the Bay, on your free time, you should maybe be hiking somewhere, or maybe you should be starting your own startup, or what,
Hmm.
maybe you have to, you believe that technology is the way that humanity progresses. And so you have to devote yourself to tech. And then in DC, it's all about policy in that maybe we have all the tech that we already need, but how do we ensure that it's like distribute access to it is distributed equally, or how do we actually make sure that disempowered people are actually given a certain level of resources to get themselves out of whatever situation that they're in. And I think in doing that, most people probably never would stop by. Like, I know most of my friends would have never been to DC for as long as they did if I didn't live there. It's kind of one of those cities that you're
Hmm.
there for work, but you might go for vacation once, but it's not like a New York or some place where you
Hmm.
would, visit a lot more often. Did you ever think that you would end up in DC?
Yes and no. Like if you had asked me 10 years ago, absolutely not. Like it wasn't a destination. I interned here after my junior year of college, and I had just the exact feeling that you've described. It just like I felt like the energy of the city really spoke to me. And I know some people find DC like the energy a little off-putting, but I just really liked being around so many people who were like deeply passionate about policy and how to improve big systems and how to make, tech more accessible or energy more sustainable or healthcare more affordable. Just the the work and the dedication of so many people really, really struck me. And so I wanted to move to DC after I graduated, and I ended up getting a job in Boston and going to Boston. But DC actually was kind of, since I interned in DC, moving back here was always the goal. And I haven't really been in a city that has resonated with me as much as DC.
That's so, are you planning on staying there for a while?
I mean, work for the government. I'll be here at least a few more years.
That's true. Yeah. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is going to be pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I feel like all the people that we knew just popped into DC for school and then either stayed for a little bit, but it'd be really interesting to meet people who like live in DC for like decades. I feel like they probably have a very
Yeah,
different experience of the city.
absolutely. I think it's a very transient city. A lot of people are coming in and out for work, school, internships. So I think the people who stay here really get a unique perspective.
Yeah. So the next thing I'm really excited to speak about, and I feel that when you told me you did this, I was so fascinated and shocked. And I was like, this is a story that has to be documented because I don't think I may meet another person who will do something like this. So I remember you had ran a marathon when we were in school, and I was like, this is so impressive. And then I call you about maybe 6 months ago or 4 months ago, and you tell me you did a 50-mile marathon. A typical marathon is 26 miles, and you told me you ran for 50 miles. And you told me it took about 9 hours, and I was absolutely mind blown. I was like, and the most insane part is you told me later that you did it without any music and you just ran naturally listening to your mind. And I think that is probably one of the most difficult challenges, physical challenges I know a person to have undertaken. And I really was excited to get into all the things that you must have learned because I think that experience alone probably has all of life lessons embedded in it in tiny little parts. And so I'm really excited to kind of get into this conversation, but maybe we can start with the genesis of your love for running. How did that start? And do you love running?
That's a funny question. I think I do. Most days I do. Some days I do it out of discipline or duty or self-loathing, but most days I love running. And I really funny. I kind of just started running in grad school as a way of kind of disciplining myself. I think I kind of admired people who ran a lot, not because I think there's a lot of necessarily a lot of virtue in it, but it just like struck me as a character of like discipline and structure. And I always liked exercising in nature. And so I was a big hiker, and I thought, why not get into running? Just way to get out of the house, way to get your heart rate up. And it's a great time to think, meditate, listen to an audiobook or the Re-Educated podcast. And and yeah, just experience the world. So that's kind of how I started and always wanted to run a marathon. So signed up for a marathon our first year of grad school in 2022. I ended up breaking my wrist and not training at all. And so I ran my first marathon without training, and it was truly an insufferable experience. One of the
Mm.
worst experience. I mean, I'm happy I finished, but it was so painful. And so then I signed up again for a marathon again in fall 2022 and thought I can do a little better than that. And actually trained for that one. And that's rest is history. That's how I got into running, but didn't really run at all before I was 24, 25 and in graduate school.
Hmm. Which really shows, I mean, yeah, if you put your mind to it. So I wanted to talk about the breaking the wrist. I'm really excited to kind of just get into the whole overcoming obstacle aspect of I feel like of a lot of your runs and a lot of the things that you've just done in your life, I feel like. But I wanted to maybe start with big picture questions of, okay, can you lay into like just like explain the experience of the 50 miles to us? Like what does that even feel like? I mean, I feel like after the first mile, I would start looking at my watch being like, are we almost done yet? I mean, what was 50 miles is a whole day of running. What was that? What was that like in your mind? What were the things that you were seeing? What was the experience like from the start to finish?
Yeah, it's a good point because if you start a long run and you're like, oh, I got to get to 26.2 miles, or I got to get to 40 miles, or I got to get to 50 miles at mile one, it's gonna seem like daunting, overwhelming. You can't really do that. So it's always, you really have to, and I think that's a big lesson is break the race up in your mind. So, the first 2 miles of that race were on a road. So I was like, I'm just gonna run this road. That's a 2 mile jog. And then it's, up a hill. So you're gonna run that hill. And then it's along a creek bed. So you run that creek bed and so on and so forth. And there's aid stations. So I always like a motto I have is run your aid station. You can always run to the next aid station. That's every, 5 or 6 miles or something like that. And there were times where running to the next aid station felt too long. So I would tell myself, the finish line was at the end of this mile. And I just make it to the end of this mile, and then you can rest, you can drop out, you can do whatever you need. And so once you get through just those little checkpoints, I think that's how you can kind of build towards something longer and something, that might seem daunting or not really feasible if you try to just tackle it all at once.
And so the 50 miles was in what state?
It was in West Virginia.
Was it through was it through the mountains?
Yeah, so it was first 2 miles were on road, and then you had overall it was through the Dolly Sods Wilderness and the Roaring Plains. There's about 6,000 feet of elevation gain, so
Oh man.
very much through the mountains of West Virginia. A lot of the elevation gain was in the first half, so that was definitely a mistake I made of thinking, oh, I'll run the first half is most of the elevation gain, and then the last, 20, 25 miles will be smooth sailing with mostly flat, and that was not at all the case. I was really, really struggling the second half, which I obviously should have expected because I'd never done anything like that, but I guess a little arrogance or hubris thought I would somehow be fine once I got the elevation gain out of the way.
That's a good word. What does hubris mean?
Hubris, I think, is overconfidence.
Oh, nice. That's a good one. I like that. Okay,
Mhm.
well, I want to get back to this idea of breaking it down or chunking your run because I think that's and I mean, I feel that all the time. I feel so overwhelmed with some of the goals that I have for my life that I'm like, sometimes I wake up, I'm like, okay, I just have to do what I need to do today. And sometimes I'm like, I've completely lost sight of the end goal. Like, what am I even doing at this point? How do you navigate, I think, the balance of those two in your runs, but also coming back to your life? Because I think there's definitely an intersection there. But how do you not lose sight of the fact that, okay, I'm doing this so at the end of the day, I will finish the 50 miles because that's like the end goal. Unless it's not, unless the goal, maybe that's not even the goal. The goal is just to experience every foot on the ground
Mhm.
and that's it. But keeping sight of that end goal, but also losing yourself in the, okay, I'm only going to focus on this one mile. How do you navigate both at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's a challenging dichotomy. And I think one, you kind of touched on this, but I think for most things that you're really dedicating yourself to, um, there's something beautiful in the process a lot of the time. So one, not one, not taking the process for granted and understanding that like a lot of times, as cliche as it may sound, like the journey is the destination. And so like with data science, which is honestly data science, I find harder for me than running. Like it's not as natural as like a way I'd spend my free time. It takes a little more, I think, mental energy for me than running. But just if I'm like trying to build a dashboard or do a project, and I'm like, I need to have this final goal done, it's so frustrating and hard. And so, but if I'm like, let's see if I can get one function built and let's really focus on learning today. and not worry about how fast I go, I find that it can be, pretty enjoyable. And, I can have like today I had a few small successes coding and got nowhere close to, building a final product. But I was like, that's like the equivalent of one training run. And so I do think there's kind of a short term, long term balance that you have to have in your brain. And I'm not sure if I have a good answer for navigating it perfectly, but I would say, setting a direction of kind of what you want to achieve and then hopefully finding a way to enjoy the process of getting there that's kind of personal and unique to you is how I like to kind of think about that dichotomy or balance.
Hmm. So it's something that's sticking for me in what you're saying, and I'm curious what your experiences are, is to me, from what you're saying, the difference between running and perhaps chasing like a big life goal that you have is that in chasing your life goal, there's no guarantee that you'll get there if you keep going step by step by step. To a large degree, there's this sense of faith that, like, if I
Mhm.
do these things, I believe in myself and I believe in the world around me that it will pay off in the way that I believe it will far into the future. But with running,
Mhm.
on the other hand, I feel that, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels that if you finish mile by mile by mile by mile, you know that at the end you will 100% reach that finish line. Do you feel like there's an aspect of faith that also plays a role into the marathon or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on something there. It's running in that sense is a confidence builder because it's kind of a positive reinforcement of, hey, this thing may seem challenging and hard, but if I do it consistently every day, I finish and I can do things that are hard. Like I can push through and I can
Hmm.
solve challenges that at one point may seem daunting. And it's a pretty kind of clear, linear way of going through that process. So then if life throws something at you that's maybe a little more abstract of how hard work and planning will help you solve it, you still are able to kind of trust the process because you've been going through that exercise with running physically is one that's kind of one way I think about that. I'm forgetting the
Hmm.
second half of your question there, but hopefully that answered it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I'm trying to think. I mean, there's so much I'm excited to get into because I think here's another one that I have for you, which is a slight tangent. But one of the beautiful things about having a marathon is that you have something to look forward to. For 6 months or
Mhm.
8 months of your life, you have like something to train for, something that like makes your life have meaning and purpose. And you're like, all right, I'm running this marathon for X reason. I think something that I notice with a lot of my students and one of the bigger failings of education in general is outside of going to college, there's nothing really like to look forward to in terms of like, I am doing these for a reason, which makes 12 years of learning just seem so kind of random. It's like, what am I actually doing? And then college itself is just more learning, but then that learning also doesn't really have like a direct placement. What did you feel like was your fundamental motivation to be like, I'm going to put up with all of this for this marathon, and the marathon means something because of blah? Like, what made the marathon have meaning to you?
It's a great question because the answer is like there's no like I've thought about it a lot and there's like no practical answer of why if I shave 20, 30 minutes, 10 minutes even off my marathon time, why, you know, the world's a better place or I'm a better person, but it's still like this deeply motivating thing. Like you said, for 6 months or 4 months, you have really something to focus on and something that excites you and a big goal. And I think it kind of gets back to that goal setting in the sense that I can put your mind to something and you can achieve it. And so I think that would be something that would be really helpful to apply, to students in school instead of having, tests every few months and after 12 years of tests, you go to one college that it doesn't even really matter where you go. Like, I mean, there's different fits, right fit for everyone, but it's not like the name of your school, I think, matters at all. And so I would love to see a kind of school transition to more of a model where a student, picks a project that they care about deeply, and every 4 or 6 months they have to present on that project, and it's a project that motivates them and excites them, and they think, if they apply what they know and and come up with an innovative solution. It could help, improve someone's life or make something more efficient. I think having that sense of excitement and goal setting for students, I think would be a great transition in our school system, whether in high school, middle school, or higher education.
So you feel like it was just something like deeply internal to you where it was like, okay, if I can do this, it means something, even though that something may not have been very like clearly laid out.
Yeah, I think so. Like it's just naturally exciting to me, I guess. It's like a chance to challenge yourself and see how
Hmm.
your body stacks up, not to
Okay.
others, but stacks up to where you think you can take it. I think having a challenge on your calendar is a really positive thing. Yeah.
Hmm. So okay, so then here's a question then, because I have recently been giving myself a push-up challenge.
Yeah.
And so and it makes me really excited to wake up, I do it at night, but before I sleep, I get excited to whatever, do my push-ups. But one thing I've recently been having happen is that when I don't hit the number that I hit like a couple days ago or a week ago, for whatever reason, maybe I'm tired that day, maybe I use my body physically in other ways, so I just don't have that same energy. I start becoming hard on myself, like, why are you, why
Hmm.
can't you do what you already did? Your growth should be linear. It needs to go up every day. When you're motivated by some outcome, how do you create the space to be empathetic with yourself when if you either don't hit the outcome or you're not like as on progress as you thought you would be? How do you create that sense of compassion for yourself?
That's coming with the heat today, Gotham. That's a great question. It's also such a challenging one because I think that's a cause for burnout for people. I mean, not just in running, but I think with running or anything physical where there's like a clear measurable outcome, a lot of people are like, oh, I deserve this PR because I trained this hard. And that's not really the case. And so that's where I kind of think you need to have that balance. Obviously, it's nice to say I did better than I did 6 months ago, but by no means can that be your only goal. Because if it is, then like you're setting yourself up to kind of for failure in some sense. So I talked a little bit about also you kind of need to love the process of what you're
Hmm.
going through. You have to believe, the discipline of going through the exercise is making you better regardless. If you don't hit your push-up goal one day, you didn't get worse. It's still better than doing zero push-ups. If I go run all the time, I go and run, and like I genuinely mean this, I struggle to get through a 4 mile run or a 6 mile run. Like it's a genuine challenge
Hmm.
just on my day to day after work. I'm running at a pace, maybe 3 or 4 minutes slower than like my half marathon pace. And it's hard to get through 5 miles. That happens multiple times a week. And so I, and so it's just important to understand that, not every day will be your best day. And obviously on race days or a test day or a presentation day, you'll do some preparation in the week before to make sure that day is a good day. But the idea that you're going to set a push-up record every day or every day is going to be your best coding day or your fastest running day, that's yeah, I think that's a way of setting up looking at the world that's going to set yourself up for a lot of disappointment. But it's a challenging question for sure, and I think a lot of people struggle with that.
I think your answer is really profound because it doesn't villainize having goals itself. It's not saying the goals are the problem. You should try to just enjoy running for the sake of running and don't have any goals around them. It's saying have your goals, but also put it in a framing where you, at the end of the day, realize that regardless whether you hit that goal or not, you are better off for having done the activity to begin
Uh,
with. And keep the goal as kind of this like this, I don't know, this like ethereal kind of place where you're going to work to get there. And that journey in itself is the beauty of it. And I think this metaphor that we're kind of speaking of for you, which manifested through running, is applicable for people's career, people's journey through education, people's journey through parenting. I mean, every aspect of life comes
mhm.
with this balance of how do I set goals for myself or for people around me, and also at the same time not lose myself to the goal, like not get so up and down when I make, not to feel so prideful of myself when I make the goal, and not to feel so low of myself when I don't make the goal, right? Like both, I think um, that journey is so deeply personal, and I think is the only way someone can sustain a passion or a motivation to do something for a long period of time. Because if you start making yourself feel terrible, I feel like it would have been hard to run for so long through all that pain because you're like, I don't even feel good
Mhm.
at the end of this, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I mean, I did that ultra marathon in West Virginia much slower than I thought, but I was still, wildly proud of myself. My goal was to maybe even break 8 hours. I did it in over 9, but in my mind, it was still a huge achievement. It's like I've run farther than I've ever run. I got to see a beautiful area. I was with a friend. Like there was so many positives of that day that like the time goal was an afterthought. And I think what you said about setting goals is you should ask yourself the question is, would I be better off if I set this goal and I work hard at it and I don't make it than if I didn't set the goal at all and go through that process? And if your answer
Mm,
is yes, then you should absolutely set the goal and go through that process. And if your answer is no, I mean, you should ask yourself why you're setting that goal, but then you probably shouldn't go through the process. But I think with a lot of things most people do that they're passionate about or they care about, I mean, they would rather, try and put in a lot of effort and fail and say, hey, look, I gave it my all than being like, oh, what if, you know?
yeah. And I want to touch on something we said a little bit earlier, but I think it's a really important point, especially for a lot of the students I work with now. A big question that I hear often is like, what's the point? I mean, what is the point of all of this? What are we
Hmm.
really doing? And I think it's a thing that I have been stuck with, and I've spoken to you so many times about it, just this concept of meaning. And it's something
Hmm.
I've been searching for so much of my life of what gives my life meaning. But
Hmm.
that being said, there is something I know that I feel when I record one of these conversations, or something I feel when I'm teaching, that like you have surpassed rationality. You've surpassed any sense of I need to find a justification or reason for why this has meaning. You're just like, this feels great, and I want to
Hmm.
continue doing it. And I enjoy how alive I feel when I'm in this process. And I think similarly, like you said earlier, maybe if you had to really rationalize what the benefit for the world would be if you ran 50 miles or 100 miles or whatever, or shaved off 20 minutes, it's hard to kind of rationalize that. But the experience of caring about something that deeply is more than enough that it surpasses the need for rationalization. What was that journey like for you, particularly when you were going through really hard days? Because I think that's where the desire for meaning comes. When you're going through a hard day and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, but you like will yourself to still do it. That's when that question of like, what is the point of this? I think often arises. How did you manage those days when you're like, I want to quit, but you still found a way to go?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question because you kind of put your finger on like there's this intrinsic sense of fulfillment that you can't really articulate. Like, and I don't know what
Mm,
humans' meaning on Earth necessarily is, or my answer might be different than your answer, but when you're doing something you love and you're passionate about it and it feels good and it feels effortless, you're not gonna you're not gonna stop doing it. And there's definitely, with anything in life, there's days where it's there are hard days and bad days. And but I mean, I kind of come back to like, would I be better off without it at all? Like there are runs that I hate, or there's days that I hate, working on code or writing about a policy thing. But if you take it out of your life altogether, do you feel better or worse? And like whenever I go a week without something now that I do pretty regularly, like running, I'm like I mean sometimes a week off can be great, don't get me wrong, but I always find myself coming back to it. And then on top of that, I do think it kind of there's just this sense of discipline of like you won't be motivated to do something 100% every day. Like not every day is going to be sunshine and roses, but if you can just build the habits of doing things that maybe you don't necessarily want to do or you're not driven to do, I think it's a valuable skill to have. I don't think it's like the most important skill on earth or the only skill, but I do think being able to do challenging things repeatedly, whether you want to or not, is an important tool to have in life.
mm. You touched a little bit about passion. Would you consider running to be your passion?
Some days I would. Some days
Hmm.
I'd consider it my nemesis. But yeah, I think of passion, it's something you can dedicate a lot of time to, and it feels effortless. Or if you have a few free hours and you don't know what to do, it's something you find yourself gravitated towards again and again. And I have to say, I've found that with running. I think there's definitely other things, other avenues of life I want to explore. But so far, I just think, being in nature or connecting with others and kind of just the rhythm and the thought process and the meditation, I think there's something very beautiful about it. And I definitely, yeah, I would call it a passion.
So I have an idea. I'm going to throw it at you. I want to hear what you think.
Hmm.
I personally find that when someone, I have a slightly different definition of passion, but I find that when someone devotes themselves to any action, it actually doesn't matter at all what the action is. I think naturally all of these like life wisdoms start coming up that you have to answer for yourself, such as, why am I doing this? Does this matter? What does it mean for me to do this well? What is discipline?
Hmm.
What is doing this honestly mean? All these like questions come up, which I think really dictate how someone ends up leading their life. And I think it's a very integral process to learning, which is, why do I care about this? Why am I learning? And how do I go about being a master or excellent at this? All three of those questions, I think, answer very deeply profound um, aspects of the human experience. My question is, I feel that, let's say I'm a seventh grader and I love running. I have a
Hmm.
hypothesis that if you actually just full send that passion for, let's say, a year or 2 years, and then naturally when your brain moves on to the next kind of thing that you fall in love with, to allow that person to do that would actually teach them far more than if you're like, oh no, your passion should only be done 1 hour on the side when you have free time, and you should actually be focusing on all these other things. My question for you is, do you feel like running has taught you more than maybe like 6 months of school or seven? Obviously, they teach you different things, but do you feel like the amount of learning in your process running has been more than you would have learned different things in a classroom? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you say so much stuff that I want to talk about. I'll start with the beginning and then get to your final question. But I do think that anytime like you're following a passion and you're challenging yourself, naturally the question of um why will come up, because your body's not just going to effortlessly power through challenging things. You're going to have to, put your mind to it and understand why you're doing it. So I think I do find that kind of regardless of what avenue you're pursuing, anytime you're pushing yourself and you're following something inside yourself, to work hard at something, you'll kind of, I think the processes are very similar, kind of regardless of whether it's intellectual, artistic, spiritual, or physical. On the question of, learning and what a seventh grader would do to learn, I mean, yes, one, I think, yes, passions evolve over time. What I loved 3 years ago is not necessarily what I love now, and it might not be what I love in 3 years. And I think allowing yourself, it's a balance, but allowing yourself to kind of pursue your interests of the time is very beautiful. I mean, we get, however many years on this earth. I'd hate to say you get to do one thing. You can only follow and try to get good at one thing. I think that's kind of ridiculous. And then finally, to what running would teach you. Yes, I do think running teaches me a lot, and I learn a lot, kind of about my mind, my body, all the things we've touched on running. But I wouldn't say alone in a vacuum. I think just running for 6 months. I mean, I think it's a great physical and meditative challenge, but I also do think it's an activity like that should be balanced with other things in life. And I mean, I see your point. If you don't want someone scheduled out, if you do this for this long and this for this long and this for this long, and that's balance and that's a good life. But at the same time, I think having, you know, a creative passion and a physical challenge are things that, and maybe even like a spiritual or intellectual challenge, or things like overall
Hmm.
having a few of those will probably lead to more balance and less burnout than going
Mm,
all out in one. But I don't know. A lot of
yeah.
great people who have achieved a lot have probably just have dove in headfirst into a single thing. But I definitely think there's different schools of thought on that.
No, but I like what you said. You split it up into. I want to make sure I got your splitting up right because I really like the fact that you just like free spitted out all four, and I like that the splitting you did. You did intellectual, physical, mental, and did you do mental? I know you did spiritual as well.
I
Did you?
think I did intellectual, physical, spiritual, and then creative or artistic was the fourth.
Creative, nice, dude. That's so fire. The fact that you just came up with that on the spot, that was good. Yes, though, I like that. Even if you don't full send a singular passion, having your mind and body be pushed in all four of these, I think yes, I agree with that as well. I was thinking more rather than like typical school seems to like hyper overdrive the intellectual side only. I mean, I was talking to one of my students, and he's a really curious and interested like kid, and he really enjoys learning. And he was telling me about his coursework, and he's taking this like really cool computer science class. He's taking this really cool physics class, this really interesting English class. I mean, interesting math class. I mean, dude, my brain would have exploded. Like the only way you could possibly interact with six subjects that are so different and so interesting in their own regard is you have to kind of like distance yourself from what you're learning to be like, okay, whatever, this
Hmm.
is just blah, 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 blah. Let me just get through the day. Because when you're really passionate about it, that's way too much intellectualization. That's not focusing at all on the other three, whether it's physical, creative, or spiritual. So I really like that little splitting up that you
Yeah.
did because I think that's a good way of thinking about you
Hmm.
can be passionate about different things, but you need to make sure they're kind of equally spread out over all four rather than just like overdrive on one.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a big challenge for kids because I mean, you go to school and then you have your extracurricular activities, and then like you have to go do your homework for all of those. Like, where's the time to really like have free time and explore the passion of any of those subjects? Uh, I think that's a huge challenge for kids these days.
Yeah. I mean, and so the next question, I guess, and this is probably for all the people who've retired recently or have a hard time kind of on the other side of a big challenge. I'm curious what you learned. What was the immediate emotion that you felt the moment you finished your marathon? And then explain what the next week was like, maybe if you remember day by day.
Yeah, there's this time I was lucky in that I didn't have kind of the post-marathon depression, but that's definitely a thing of kind of like you set this goal and you go and you achieve it or you don't. But regardless of whether I've achieved my big time goal or I don't, there's typically been kind of this post-marathon letdown of, like you said earlier, for 4 or 6 months, you have this thing that's exciting you, it's motivating you, it's on your calendar, you're training for it, and then it's over. And you're like, what am I doing now? Where's my direction? And the wrong answer is to sign up for a next race immediately and just do the same thing. And the right answer is kind of to sit with that feeling for a while, in my opinion. In terms of right after the race, oh, it's just relief. Dude, you've been like running for 9 hours and your your legs are like covered in mud and sore. The roof of my mouth was like raw. I don't know why. I had been hiccuping for 3 hours and dry heaving. I was just ready
Mm,
to have a soda, sit with my girlfriend, sit with my friend on a hill and watch the other runners finish on like a sunny
mm,
day in West Virginia. It was just sitting on that hill, like watching the clouds in the sky and everyone else cheering on their friends and loved ones. It's a very satisfying feeling. It's really just
mm,
very like it's like the simplest form of existence, and it's just like I some sense still a deep physical uncomfort, just but like the purest form of bliss. You don't really want much else because you can't really do much else, and you're just so content to be done and sitting there.
and how long does that feeling last?
Uh, lasted for me a few hours. I'd say it lasted the day of. There's a high the next day too. I honestly think like I've found like there's a high, through the night, and then maybe the next day there's a high, and then once you kind of have to go to work for the next day or you're back in the routine of your life, it starts to set in, and you have to just spend some time sitting with the feelings of like, oh, maybe I don't have as much direction as I did now, but that's okay. Like, let's think about what I want to do next. And let's not
Mm,
just like reflexively sign up for the exact same thing or run another race. Like, let's think about if that's actually what I want to do, or if I want to set a different goal or chart a different path in life. Like, I remember after I
mm,
ran my second marathon, uh, my knee was hurt, but it was also like our third semester of grad school, and I did really kind of dedicate myself more deeply to school than I had. And that was for me at that time the right answer. And I'm happy I did it. So, it
mm.
definitely forces you to reevaluate, though, I would say, post race or retirement or graduation or any big life event like that is a great time to kind of reflect and actually think about what you want to do next.
Where you are. Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that came
Yeah.
up. I feel like as you were kind of, I just always remember there was this one Giannis Antetokounmpo video. Who he's a great basketball player for those who may not have heard his name. And he won, I believe, in 2020 or 2021, the NBA championship. And immediately after, when the reporters asked him, he was talking about waiting to win the next one. And it was like this huge thing that he had worked his whole career to get. And immediately it was like, I'm ready for the next one. I think it's always been fascinating for me to like learn from people who have achieved these really like complex things to be like, I think everyone just, I think people who love something really do love the process. I actually do not think, I don't think his drive was ever just to win the chip because once you won a chip, then you'd stop playing. Like it, you keep setting the goal higher and higher because it motivates you to keep going. And the going itself is what makes life worth living in a lot of ways. And I think I personally feel that in a lot of ways where I'm like, I need to spend a little bit more time actually reflecting on the things that I've done. Because for every hard thing that you overcome, it's kind of like a sticker you get to put on your belt or in your life journal where you're like, I did this. No matter what happens in the rest of your life, you will always know you were able to put together the effort and the determination and the dedication and whatever else to run this 50 miles. And that's something no one can take away from you, no matter how your life turns out. And so it's like this Boy Scouts badge kind of being like, I have done this. And it's something I get to die knowing that I've done. And I think that level of pride within yourself and the effort that you had to put is something that people don't talk about when you start taking like shortcuts. Like nobody ever told me this. Like, and when I look, an example I have of this is like when I look at my undergrad college essay, I feel no level of pride towards that piece of paper because it was run through 20 different people who all made their own changes just so it could be optimized to get into school. It
Mhm.
completely took my voice out of it. It took my soul out of it. It took my reflection out of it, any of it. So it no longer, it just became something that was purely about the outcome. And did the outcome turn out fine? Yeah, it worked fine. But no one talks about the value of like being prideful of like the things that you've done. And that only comes through honest, good work. And like when I look at my grad school paper, for example, like that, I had my best friend read it and I poured my soul into that. And so when I read that, there's a level of pride. Whether I got into school or not is completely separate from the fact that I can look at that and always know that that was me and that was my effort and that was something that meant a lot to me. And I feel that when there's more importance placed on that, then like shortcuts stop to exist. This whole like issue of cheating and what that represents ceases to exist in a lot of ways. And it just it's really impressive, I think, that you were able to kind of go through this whole process and honestly do it. You didn't get in a car, do 30 miles in the car, and then get off the car and then do the last 20 alone. Like you really did the whole thing honestly, which I think is really impressive.
Thank you, Gotham. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, yeah, what you said, there's no station in life that's like happiness or success, you know?
Mm,
Everyone, there's always, more to be had. And like I think early on in college, my friend shared a poem with me about that of like, I was thinking, oh, like once I get this internship, then I'll be relaxed, and happy. And it was just such like a false way of thinking. You have to enjoy the process because there's always the next thing you have to do, and there's always another task and another challenge, and there's no status or level of achievement or station that's going to be like, oh, that's it, I've made it, I've done. And so just, being being like really grateful and satisfied with what you have and reflecting on what you've done is so important. And then also like we've said, just really enjoying that process, I think are two good things. And to get back to that Giannis Antetokounmpo, and like the next year after he lost the playoffs, there was an interview, and some reporter asked him if his season was a failure, and he was like, "Of course, it's not a failure. You're not going to win every time, but we learned, we got better, we worked towards our goal, and next year we'll be even closer." And he said to the reporter, like, "You don't get promoted every year." And so there's not going to be like a sense of external validation all the time. And so understanding how to work through that, I also think is really important.
Mm. Wow. I mean, I'm writing that down right now. Just there's not always going to be a sense of external validation. It's just so real. Sometimes you just have to find it deeply within yourself because there may be a time where you're in the middle of a marathon and you're like, I actually don't think it's possible or healthy for me to finish this. Like maybe I actually should
Yeah.
stop. And that
Yeah,
doesn't mean you
absolutely. You should
necessarily
definitely
failed.
stop races sometimes. Exactly. No, that's the smart, right answer sometimes. Is like, sometimes
Yeah.
the off day is great. There's discipline and there's also wisdom, and I think you definitely you need to
Mm.
marry both.
And see, this is why, you know, it's so fascinating how something that's just physical, all you did was run, but how deeply
Hmm.
interconnected that is with the creative, with the spiritual, with the intellectual. I think like
Hmm.
you was how much we were able to pull out from this experience is all just intellectual and spiritual stuff. And even in your process of running, picking where you want to run, how you want to run, how do you want to make your route? Even I feel like that it's fascinating how much wisdom we've been able to pull out of this experience. You've been able to pull out of this experience and we've been able to have in this conversation. Because I just think like who knew, maybe you didn't know that would have also happened just by chasing this run, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I didn't even realize how much, wisdom or how much running had influenced or impacted me until having this conversation with you. I obviously understood that there was kind of these meditative, spiritual, social, emotional, aspects to it, but I think having the chance to kind of express them to you has really made me realize, oh wow, there's actually really influenced how I think, not just about
Yeah.
running, but I think about all these other areas of my life as well.
And I think if I was to try to put a bow on this conversation, I think that is the beauty of passion. It, one, it can exist in anything. It doesn't have to be what people typically think you can be passionate about. Like you could be passionate about cleaning dishes. Like it literally doesn't matter. When you are driven by something and you commit yourself to it, even on the days you don't want to do it. Like you said earlier, it's those days that you don't want to do it where you have those meditations on what is meaning, what is purpose. So those days are also important for that reason. And the other days where you reach your successes or the days where you reach your failures or those days where each one of those teach you something so profound about life that no classroom where everything is purely just intellectual can ever do. And so I think that in that sense, like passion is something that really can evoke a deep sense of learning in so many important questions I think humans have. But I'm really glad you were able to find something that kept you motivated for a while.
Thank you, Gautam. I completely agree. I'm gonna say one final thing, which is a conversation we had that I'm not sure you remember, but we were kind of talking about excellence and presence one day, and I was like, I don't know, there's some things I feel like you just do and you got to get them out of the way, like making your bed or washing the dishes. And you were like, no, if you're making the bed, you should make the bed as best as you possibly can, and you should be 100% present in making the bed. And at the time, it kind of pissed me off. I was like annoyed. I was like, what are you talking about with making the bed? But like over time, I've come to see like the profound wisdom in that. So when you're just talking about washing the dishes, I thought of that of like no matter what you do, it doesn't have to be glamorous or glorious, but I think it's all part of like a larger process of building presence and gratitude and also like a sense of enjoying the process of working towards your goal or working through life.
This was a lovely conversation, man. I'm actually really glad we were able to capture in time the experience that you had of running this. And I know you one day want to run even more and do more really amazing things with your life. But I'm really glad we're able to take the time to kind of capture this conversation. It's actually really it makes me very happy.
This was such a pleasure, Gautam. I do now fully see the joy and why you love podcasting so much.
Yeah, I mean, after listening to it for so long, you get to be on the other side, which is so cool.
I know.
It makes me really happy that you one listened, and then two, now that you get to be on it too. And I hope we have a regular correspondence where you get to show up every year or two and share a little bit about what you've learned.
It would be a privilege. It's like getting to go like be a character in a book or your TV show. It's very special. So I appreciate it, and I'd love to come back anytime.
Oh, thanks for taking the time, man. I love you.
I appreciate it too. I love you too, Gautam.
And that brings us to the end of our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again for listening and making this process so much more enjoyable. If you haven't had the chance to already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts to get the latest updates on new episodes. If you've been learning useful information here, feel free to leave a review as well. A little bit goes a long way in spreading this podcast. And have a wonderful day. And as per usual, stay re-educated.